Riverton County Superior Court. Winter morning. You could feel it the moment you stepped inside. That kind of cold that doesn't come from the weather, but from people holding their breath too long. From fear. From things nobody wants to say out loud. Outside, the snow kept falling over Riverton like someone had shaken a giant snow globe and forgot to stop. It pressed against the tall glass windows of the courthouse, turning everything into a blur of white and gray. But inside, the air felt tight, stiff, like even the walls knew something bad was about to happen. And right there, in the middle of that giant room with the wooden benches and the echo that never seemed to end, walked Ellie Turner. 9 years old, tiny, fragile, the kind of small that makes you want to wrap her in a blanket and hide her from the world. Her boots barely made a sound on the marble floor, but every step looked heavy, like she was dragging memories behind her, memories she didn't ask for. Her eyes weren't empty, not exactly. More like fogged over, like she wasn't fully here. Like part of her was stuck somewhere else, somewhere dark. And right beside her, matching her pace step by steady step, was Shadow. A German shepherd with a coat like storm clouds, and scars hiding under the fur. He'd served in 48 K9 missions, 48, and survived things that would break most people. But here, he didn't look like a fearless police dog. He looked like a guardian angel wearing fur. Calm. Focused. Never more than an inch from Ellie's side. Every time she hesitated, Shadow paused too, nudging her leg gently, like, "It's okay. Keep going." People watched them. They always watched them. Some with pity, some with curiosity, others with that judgmental squint that says, "What's wrong with her?" But Shadow didn't care. His eyes scanned the room the way trained dogs do, quick, sharp, reading every little thing like a silent threat analysis. Then, yeah, he appeared. Marcus Hale, the so-called top defense attorney in Colorado. The guy with the perfect haircut, the perfect suit, the perfect smile. A smile that made you feel like you needed a shower after seeing it. He walked toward Ellie like he owned the place, like the floor rolled out a red carpet for him. He crouched down slowly, too slowly, pretending to be gentle, pretending to be warm, pretending to be the kind of adult who wanted to help a scared kid. "Hey there, Ellie," he whispered, voice all honey. "You doing okay today?" But then, yeah, he leaned in just a tiny bit closer, close enough that only Ellie and Shadow could hear him, and his voice changed, lower, colder, sharp, like a razor hidden in cotton. "Sit still," he breathed, "or your dog dies first." Ellie's breath caught, like someone crushed the air right out of her lungs. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her hands twitched once, just once, but she forced them still, and Shadow felt it, the shift, the threat. He didn't growl, he didn't bark, he did something way scarier. He lifted his head, and stared straight into Marcus Hale's eyes. That stare wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it said everything. Like, I know exactly what you are. I've seen monsters like you before. Try it. I dare you. Marcus froze, half a second, because he knew that stare wasn't from a pet. It was from a soldier. From an animal who'd survived too much to be intimidated by a man like him. Then he smiled again. Fake. Plastic. See you inside, he muttered, straightening his suit. But Ellie. Yeah. Ellie had already shrunk into the seat beside Shadow. Her fingers curled into his fur, like it was the last solid thing in the world. And honestly, in that room, in that moment, it kind of was. And the thing is, the moment Marcus walked off like nothing happened, that's when Ellie's mind just, slipped. Like someone flipped a switch in her head and dragged her backward, straight into the night she'd been trying so damn hard to forget. It hit her fast. Too fast. 1 second she was sitting there on that wooden bench in the courtroom, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. And the next, she wasn't in Riverton County Court anymore. She was back in that little house on Cedar Ridge Road, the one with the broken porch light and the wind chime her mom loved. And she heard it. That sound. Glass exploding. Sharp. Violent. Too loud for her small world. The memory crashed over her like a wave she couldn't duck under. She squeezed her eyes shut, but that only made everything clearer, louder, like some cruel movie she couldn't pause. Her mom's voice. God, that voice. Calling her name. Ellie! Ellie, stay in your room! Then the heavy footsteps, the shouting, the thud against the wall, the way the whole house seemed to shake, like it was scared too. She felt her hands start to tremble. She tried to hide them, tucking them into Shadow's fur. But it didn't help. The tremors traveled up her arms, into her shoulders, curling her forward like she was shrinking into herself. And honestly, in that packed courtroom, with all those eyes staring, whispering, judging, she felt like she was disappearing, like she could fall straight through the floor and no one would even notice. Someone behind her coughs, just a little, and she flinches so hard the bench creaks. Her breathing turns shaky, too quick, too shallow. That awful, floaty feeling creeps up her spine. The one that says, you're not safe. Because she isn't. Not with Marcus Hale circling around the room, like a shark smelling blood. Ellie pulls her feet up slightly, the way she used to in bed when she thought something might grab her ankles. Her chest feels tight, like she's wearing a vest 3 sizes too small. Her throat burns the way it did when she tried to scream that night, and nothing came out. And people, they notice. Not in a kind way. No, more like, what's wrong with her? Why is she acting weird? Marcus sees it too, that crack in her armor, and he moves. Slowly, deliberately, like he's savoring every step. He passes behind her row, leaning just barely close enough that she can actually feel his breath on her ear. No cameras see it. No jurors hear it. No one else catches a thing. But Ellie does, and Shadow does. Say one wrong word, sweetheart, and I'll take that mutt out myself. The room doesn't move. The judge keeps reading. The prosecutor flips through her notes. But Ellie? She shatters. The fear hits her so hard it knocks the air right out of her lungs. She grips Shadow's fur like she's drowning. And he's the only solid thing left in the universe. Her eyes sting, vision blurring. Time 400 psems. Her heart slams against her ribs so loud, she's sure everyone can hear it. Shadow reacts instantly, not with a bark, not with a growl. He just shifts his weight, subtle, slow, and leans his whole body against her leg. Steady, heavy, solid, like a wall standing in front of a storm. His breathing is calm, deep, controlled. But his eyes? Yeah, those eyes. Locked onto Marcus Hale with the kind of cold, calculating focus only a dog trained for combat ever carries. Ellie buries her face into Shadow's shoulder, trying to escape the echoes in her mind. The glass, the shouting, her mom's final scream. She whispers, barely a sound, "Shadow, please don't let him hurt you." Shadow lifts his head slightly, pressing it into her cheek as if saying, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And somehow, even in that suffocating courtroom, even with terror clawing at her ribs, Ellie believes him. And honestly, if you think things were already bad for Ellie in part 2, well, yeah, this is where it gets even uglier. Because fear, it's awful. But injustice, that's a whole different kind of monster. The courtroom hadn't even settled from the last witness, when Marcus Hale strutted back to his table like he'd just won a damn award. He had that look, yeah, that smug, "I've got this in the bag" grin. And why wouldn't he? He'd spent months, maybe years, weaving a plan so tight it could choke the truth to death. The judge called the next witness, and a woman stood up from the gallery. Mid-50s, floral scarf, nervous smile, Mrs. Eleanor Briggs, the friendly neighborhood lady. Or, well, that's what she wanted everyone to believe. She walked up to the stand like she was stepping into church, clutching a tissue she didn't even need. Marcus stepped forward, voice soft, oh so gentle. "Mrs. Briggs, thank you for being here. Could you please tell the court what you witnessed that night?" The woman pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "Oh yes. Yes, I saw Samuel Turner. I saw him right outside their house, late at night, pacing. He looked upset." She sniffed loudly, way too loudly. "It frightened me." Ellie's head snapped up. Liar. She didn't say it out loud, but Shadow felt her whole body stiffen. Because Ellie knew Mrs. Briggs lived 3 houses down and slept through earthquakes. Marcus clasped his hands, nodding sympathetically like some saint. And you're absolutely sure it was him? Oh yes, she insisted. I'd know that jacket anywhere. The problem? Samuel Turner didn't even own a jacket like that. Not then. Not ever. But the jury didn't know that. The cameras didn't know that. And the people in Riverton, sipping coffee and watching the trial on morning news? Yeah, they didn't know either. All they saw was a sweet older woman with nothing to gain. Except she had everything to gain. A lovely little envelope of cash from Marcus Hale to help justice find clarity. Before Ellie could even process that lie, another witness took the stand. A tall, skinny guy with a buzz cut and a twitchy left eyebrow. Eric Norris. IT specialist. He wouldn't make eye contact, kept rubbing his palms on his jeans like he was trying to erase guilt. Marcus approached with a proud little smirk. Mr. Norris, you were the technician who reviewed the home security footage, correct? The guy swallowed hard. Yes, yes, sir. And what did you discover? Norris hesitated. A split second. But Ellie saw it. Shadow saw it too. His ears twitched. The footage from that night was corrupted. Entirely unusable. Beyond recovery. A murmur swept through the courtroom, like a gust of cold wind. Ellie's nails dug into Shadow's fur. Because she remembered, clear as day, Officer Grant told her they had footage. Not perfect, but it existed. And now this guy was saying it magically disappeared? Another lie. Another thread in Marcus's web. Then came the worst part. Marcus put up a blown-up photo of Ellie's dad, Samuel Turner, on an easel. There he was, exhausted, beaten down by months in a cell for a crime he didn't commit. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus said smoothly, walking in front of the jury like he was hosting a talk show. This man was seen near the home. He had motive. And as we all know, trauma can distort a child's perception. There it was. That sentence. That heavy, cruel sentence that slashed right through Ellie's chest. Trauma can distort a child's perception. So now she wasn't just scared. She wasn't just grieving. She was what? Unreliable? Confused? Broken? People in the audience nodded. Some whispered. Some pitied her. Others doubted her. And Marcus soaked in every second of it. Ellie felt herself sinking again, sliding down into that awful place where truth didn't matter, and lies wore suits. Her breaths got shaky. Shadow leaned hard into her leg, grounding her, pulling her back inch by inch. But still, the damage was done. Marcus Hale had turned the entire room against a 9-year-old girl. And you know, I gotta ask you something here. If you were sitting in that courtroom, watching all this unfold, would you believe the kid, fall for the manipulations, or march down there and tell the truth to sit the hell back down? And after all that lying, twisting, whispering in part 3, yeah, this is the moment. when the whole damn room finally felt the weight of it landing on one tiny kid's shoulders. Ellie didn't make a sound, not a whimper, not a gasp, nothing. She just lowered her head, real slow, like her neck couldn't carry the truth anymore. And then the tears came, quiet, hot, heavy. They slid off her cheeks and disappeared into Shadow's fur, the thick, rough kind of fur that had seen too many bad nights and too many broken people. But you know, watching her cry like that, it hit different. It wasn't loud crying. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of crying that happens when you've held it together for way too long, and the damn dam finally gives out. Shadow felt it first. He shifted. Not a big move. Nothing sudden. Just a slow, deliberate scoot closer until his whole side pressed against her legs, like he was trying to say, if the world's gonna push you down, it's gotta go through me first. Ellie curled her fingers deeper into his fur, trying, God, trying so hard, not to fall apart completely. Her shoulders trembled in that small, helpless way that makes you want to grab her, wrap her up, and tell her she's safe, even though she wouldn't believe it. Not yet. And here's the thing. The room changed. It didn't change loud. It didn't change suddenly. But people felt something. A kind of tightening in their chests. Like someone reached across the benches and just squeezed everybody's heart at once. The gallery went still, so still you could hear someone's bracelet clink when they shifted. Even the camera crews lowered their lenses a bit, almost like they felt guilty catching this on tape. A couple jurors leaned forward, faces softening. One woman pressed her lips together, like she might cry too. A man in the second row blinked hard and shook his head, trying to convince himself this wasn't as messed up as it looked. But it was. It absolutely was. Because there, in the middle of that big, polished courtroom with its flags and its seals and its oak benches, sat a kid the whole damn world had decided wasn't believable enough. A kid who had watched adults twist her pain into some kind of performance. A kid who didn't have a single person in that room except one, actually standing between her and the monster wearing a silk tie. Shadow lifted his head and scanned the gallery. And I swear to you, this wasn't just a dog looking around. This was a soldier assessing threats. His eyes were darker than usual, pupils pinched tight, ears angled forward like antennas tuned to every tiny shift in the room. If anyone looked at Ellie too long, too harshly, Shadow's head tilted just a fraction. A warning. A promise, a silent, back off. Ellie's tears dripped down onto his ear. Shadow didn't move away. Instead, he angled his face up toward hers and nudged her gently with his nose. Just once. So soft you might miss it if you blinked. Her breathing hitched. She reached both arms around his neck and buried her face there, hiding from everything. Every whisper, every stare, every lie. And something happened then. The gallery stopped judging. You could almost feel the shift in the air. Like everyone suddenly realized they weren't watching a witness. They were watching a child who'd had her world destroyed and was still somehow showing up to speak for the truth, even when she could barely speak at all. Shadow exhaled, long and steady, his chest rising and falling under Ellie's cheek, that rhythm. The slow, grounded, unshakable rhythm of a protector, wrapped around her like a shield. And people saw it. Not the evidence, not the arguments, not the lawyers. They saw a little girl, shaking quietly, clinging to the only living being who had never once lied to her. And honestly, tell me this, because I'm curious. If you were sitting there, watching that kid hold on like her whole world depended on that one dog, your heart would break a little too, wouldn't it? Where it all began. And honestly, as everyone in that courtroom watched Ellie fall apart in part 4, there's something most of them didn't know. Something that would have changed the way they looked at her and that dog sitting beside her. Because the bond between Ellie and Shadow? Yeah, it didn't just happen. It came from a place way deeper than anyone imagined. It started 2 years earlier. Summer of 2021. Back when Ellie still had a voice, and then suddenly didn't. Riverton Police Department had this small therapy room tucked behind the main hallway. Kind of forgotten, kind of quiet, always smelling like mint tea and old carpet. That's where they took her after the night her world broke apart. She sat on this chair, legs pulled up, sweatshirt sleeves covering her hands, chin tucked into her knees. Didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't blink much either. Honestly, she looked like someone had pressed a mute button on her whole soul. The therapist, Dr. Rachel Green, tried everything. Soft questions, silly toys, drawing pads, little sticker charts. Nothing worked. Ellie just stared at the floor like she was trying to disappear into it. Then one afternoon, Officer Grant Morgan, yeah, the same man sitting at the back of the courtroom years later, walked in carrying a leash. Behind him padded a large, quiet German shepherd with deep amber eyes that somehow looked older than time. Grant didn't do a dramatic intro. He just stepped inside, scratched the back of his neck and said, Hey, Dr. Green? Thought maybe he could, I don't know, keep her company? Ellie didn't even look up. Dr. Green hesitated. This is Shadow, right? The retired K9? Grant nodded. Yeah. He, he's good with scared kids. Doesn't rush 'em. Doesn't talk. Just listens. Shadow stood in the doorway for a moment, studying Ellie with this patience that honestly felt human. Then he walked in, quiet, steady, and lay down beside her chair. No barking, no nudging, just settling in. Like he was saying, I'll wait. Take your time. Minutes passed, then more minutes, then an hour. Ellie didn't move. Shadow didn't either. But something tiny, shifted. Not in her face, not in her body, somewhere deeper. Over the next few sessions, Shadow kept showing up. Every single time he'd walk straight to her chair and lie down with this gentle sigh, stretching his paws out like he owned the place. Ellie pretended not to care, ignored him, but her foot always drifted, just a little closer. Then one day, it finally happened. She'd been sketching something small on a scrap of paper, just shapes, nothing real, when Shadow stretched and bumped her knee with his nose. Not hard, not playful, just this soft little, "Hey, I'm here." Ellie froze, like someone stopped the world mid-breath. Then, her fingers slid down, brushing his fur. Hesitant at first, then more sure. Shadow didn't pull back. He leaned into it, eyes closing just a bit. Dr. Green's eyes widened, but she didn't dare speak. And then, God, this part still hits. Ellie whispered the most fragile, broken little word. Shadow. It was hoarse, barely audible, half air, half hope, but it was hers, her voice, after months of silence. Shadow lifted his head, ears perked, tail brushing the floor once, like he'd been waiting for exactly that. Ellie's throat tightened. She pressed her face into his neck and whispered again, stronger, pitch twist. Shadow. Dr. Green covered her mouth, tears welling. She motioned silently for Officer Grant outside the door. When he peeked in, even he froze. Because it wasn't just a kid petting a dog. It was a broken little soul finding the first thread of herself again. From that day forward, Shadow wasn't just the therapy dog or the retired K9. He was, well, half of her. Where Ellie went, he went. Where she faltered, he steadied. Where she silenced, he listened. And by the time they walked into that courtroom together years later, yeah, they weren't just girl and dog anymore. They were one heartbeat split in two bodies. And the crazy thing is, while everyone else in that courtroom thought Ellie was breaking apart in part 5, something else, something tiny, something nobody noticed, was actually starting to wake up inside her. Hope. Yeah, that word. The last thing anybody expected to find in a room filled with lies and fear and adults acting like monsters in nice shoes. It happened fast. Quicker than a heartbeat, really. Marcus Hale walked past her again. Too close. Always too close. Like he enjoyed watching her flinch. And he leaned down, pretending to adjust his tie, pretending to drop a file. But Ellie felt him before she heard him. That awful heat on her ear. That same poison-slick whisper he'd used before. Careful, kid. One wrong word, and that dog's gone. And for a second, just a second, Ellie felt the whole world tilt the wrong way. Like she was right back on Cedar Ridge Road, hearing her mother scream, hearing the glass shatter, feeling herself shrink down to nothing. But before the panic swallowed her, something else flickered. A tiny light. Faint. Fast. Easy to miss. A soft blink under Shadow's collar. 1, 2. Pulse. Ellie blinked too, not sure she'd really seen it. Marcus kept moving, stepping away with that smug little half-smile. He had no idea what he'd just triggered. Shadow didn't move, didn't twitch, didn't even look up. But Ellie knew that dog, knew him better than she knew the sound of her own voice, and she felt it, in the way his muscles tightened slightly under her hand. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. Shadow had heard the threat, recognized the tone, that same low, malicious vibration he'd been trained to detect on missions. And the device tucked inside his collar, the one Officer Grant had shown Ellie months earlier, responded all on its own, not to shouting, not to noise, to danger. Ellie swallowed hard, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. Her breathing slowed just enough that she didn't feel like she was drowning. And then she leaned back a little, just enough to peek under Shadow's collar. There it was, the tiniest red glow, warm, rhythmic, alive, recording. Her heart didn't leap exactly, but it stirred, like someone cracked open a window in a room that had been locked up for years. She looked up at Shadow, and he looked back. Not fully, just the shift of one amber eye. But it was enough to say, "I've got it. I heard him." Her lips trembled, not from fear this time. Something else. Something sharper. A smile. Tiny, crooked, barely there, pulled at the corner of her mouth. It felt strange. It felt new, like testing a muscle she hadn't used in ages. She pressed her hand gently against Shadow's neck, feeling the vibration of the recorder humming beneath his fur. It was like holding truth in her palm, truth that nobody could twist, bury, or buy their way around. For the first time since stepping into that courtroom, Ellie's spine straightened. Just a little, barely noticeable unless you were really watching her. Shadow exhaled, slow and steady. His body softened against her leg, but something in his posture stayed razor sharp, guarding, waiting, ready. Ellie didn't speak. She couldn't. But inside her mind, her thoughts whispered to him like a secret she'd never say aloud. "Thank you. Don't stop. Please don't stop." When Marcus glanced back from across the room, expecting to see the same terrified kid he'd been tearing down all day, he froze. Because Ellie wasn't crumbling anymore. She was staring at him. Not brave, exactly, but knowing, and nothing unnerves a predator faster than realizing the prey isn't as helpless as they look. Ellie lowered her gaze again, letting her hair fall forward to hide her expression. But that small, secret smile didn't go away. Not this time. Because, yeah, the room was still dark, still hostile, still unfair. But there, under the collar of a dog who loved her more than his own breath, a spark had lit. A spark that could burn the whole damn lie to the ground. And the wild thing is, nobody in that courtroom had a clue. Not one. They all thought Ellie was just sitting there quietly falling apart, and Shadow was just being a good dog. And Officer Grant, well, he looked like he was just watching the trial like everybody else. But he wasn't. He'd been waiting, watching, listening, hands resting on that small, dark gray remote in his coat pocket. The one nobody ever noticed, because he never gave them a reason to. And then Marcus Hale stood up for what he clearly believed would be his final victory lap. He smoothed down his perfect tie, flashed that smarmy, "Trust me, I'm a professional" smile at the jury, and started talking like he was delivering a speech at some lawyer's award dinner. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, spreading his arms like he owned the oxygen in the room, "the evidence simply doesn't support the accusations. The child is frightened, confused, traumatized, but trauma does not equal truth." Ellie shrank down, fingers gripping Shadow's fur so tightly her knuckles went pale. Shadow stayed still as a statue, except for one tiny flick of his ear. Officer Grant saw it. That was his signal. Hale kept going, bigger, louder, more arrogant with every word. "And so," he said, pacing in front of the jury like he was about to deliver the final blow, "I move that all charges against my client be—" Click. The softest sound in the whole damn building, barely noticeable. But Ellie heard it. Shadow heard it. And Hale, well, Hale didn't yet, but he was about to. A faint crackle burst through the courtroom speakers. Hale stopped mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-breath. Everyone froze. The judge looked up, brows knitting. "Is there a technical issue?" Grant didn't answer, didn't move. He just held, his thumb on the remote. And then, the voice, Hale's voice. Not calm, not charming, not polished. Venomous, low, hissing, echoing through every speaker in the courtroom. "Sit still, or your dog dies first." Silence. Total silence. Like someone vacuumed the air out of the room, then, boom. The entire courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, whispers. A full-blown emotional detonation. Ellie covered her mouth. Shadow pressed closer. Hale's face drained white, like someone unplugged him. Cindy Rhodes, the head prosecutor, shot to her feet. "Oh my God," she yelled, pointing at Hale. "That's his voice! That's his voice! It's crystal clear!" The judge hammered the gavel, but even he looked shaken. "Order! Order!" But the recording kept going. Grant let it play. Another whisper. Another threat. "If the files aren't gone by morning, we have a problem. You make them disappear. Understand?" A roar rolled through the gallery. Hale stumbled backward, shaking his head like he could outrun his own words. "That's fake! That's doctored! I never—" But he didn't get to finish. Grant pressed the button again. New audio. A different conversation. Hale's voice. Unmistakable. "Briggs gets the money when she lies. Norris deletes the footage. Nobody finds out." Cindy's jaw dropped. Jesus. He paid them. He paid them. The jurors turned as one, staring at Hale like he'd just ripped off a mask and revealed the monster underneath. He looked around desperately, sweat beading along his hairline. "Stop! This is illegal! This is the truth!" the judge snapped, voice cracking like thunder. Two bailiffs stepped forward. Hale backed away, palms out, shaking. I didn't. This is. Wait. Listen." Click. Grant hit play one last time. Hale's whisper, the nail in his coffin. "Tell the kid she imagined it. Kids break easy." That was it. The gallery exploded into shouting. A woman sobbed. Someone cursed loudly. One juror stood up so fast his chair clattered backward. The judge slammed the gavel. "Mr. Hale, you are under arrest for witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence." Hale froze. Then the bailiff grabbed his arms. And kachk! The handcuffs snapped shut. The sound echoed more powerfully than any gavel ever could. Ellie gasped. Not in fear, but in something like shock and fragile relief. Shadow nudged her thigh gently, eyes softening for the first time in hours. "And I gotta ask you, if you were sitting in that courtroom right then, seeing the mask ripped clean off a man like Hale, would you feel, 1, satisfied, 2, furious, he got that far, or 6, just straight up amazed Shadow caught him, and right after those cuffs snapped shut in part 7? Yeah, that sound that felt like justice finally breathing again. Something happened that nobody could have prepared for. The room didn't explode this time. It softened. Not in a weak way. More like the whole place finally exhaled after holding its breath for months. Ellie was the first one people noticed. She wasn't shaking anymore. She wasn't curling into herself or staring at the floor like it could swallow her whole. She just threw her arms around Shadow's neck and held on like she'd fall off the world without him. Her small fingers dug into his fur, her chest rising and falling in these choppy, uneven breaths. Half sobs, half relief, all heart. Shadow leaned into it, pressing his forehead to her shoulder, eyes closing slow and steady. Not tired, not stressed, just peaceful. People started clapping, not the loud kind, not the courtroom TV drama kind. It was softer, honest, a sound full of finally, and thank God, and that poor kid. Someone in the gallery sniffled so loud the judge looked up. Another person wiped their eyes with the back of their sleeve. Even the court stenographer paused, hands hovering above her keys, tears collecting at the corners of her lashes like she'd been trying not to break all morning. And then, through the doorway at the back of the courtroom, came Samuel Turner. Not escorted this time, not handcuffed, just a father who had been trapped behind bars for something he didn't do. When he saw Ellie, man, the sound he made wasn't even a word. It was this deep, cracked noise from a place so raw, it made a few jurors look away. "Ellie," he whispered, voice shaking like a loose light bulb. She turned. Her face lit up so fast it was almost painful to see, like someone had switched her whole world back on. "Daddy!" She ran, not walked, not tiptoed. She ran, full speed, full heart, and he dropped to his knees just in time to catch her. He held her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he blinked. His hands kept moving, touching her back, brushing her hair away, cupping the side of her face, like he needed to convince himself she was really there. He buried his face into her shoulder and just cried. Actually cried. The kind of crying grown men hide because the world tells them to be strong. But right there, he let himself feel everything. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so, so sorry you went through this." And Ellie, voice still small but stronger than it had been in months, whispered back, "It's okay, Daddy. Shadow helped." Samuel looked at the dog, this tired old shepherd with battle-worn fur and eyes too wise for this world, and something passed between them. A thank you, a promise, a kind of recognition only two protectors can share. Later that afternoon, when the courthouse finally emptied, Officer Grant took Shadow to the Riverton Vet Clinic for a full checkup. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and pine cleaner, and Ellie sat holding Shadow's leash like she was afraid someone might take him away. But they didn't. Not this time. The vet came out with a small smile, one of those sweet, soft smiles that makes your shoulders drop a little. "He's healthy," she said. "A little older, a little worn down, but he's earned that. And," she held out a certificate, "he's officially cleared for retirement." Ellie looked at Shadow. Shadow looked at Ellie. She smiled. A real smile. Not shaky. Not forced. A sunshine kind of smile. The kind she hadn't worn since the world fell apart. Shadow nudged her hand with his nose like saying, "Told you I'd get you through." And for the first time in a very, very long time, Ellie believed him. And honestly, after everything that happened in Part 8, the tears, the relief, the whole damn courtroom finally breathing again, it makes sense that the whole town wanted to do something big, something loud, something that said, "We saw what you did, old boy, and we won't forget." So when 2023 rolled around, the Riverton Police Department announced a ceremony, not just some small, awkward handshake in a hallway. No. This was an event. The Quiet Valor Award, a medal reserved for acts of bravery that didn't make headlines, didn't explode on the news, didn't involve flashy hero moments, just pure, quiet courage. Shadow's kind of courage. People came from everywhere, officers, neighbors, reporters, the mayor, even kids holding hand-painted signs with paw prints on them. The auditorium was packed so tightly you could barely squeeze through the rows. The air felt warm, electric, like the whole town's heartbeat was echoing inside those four walls. Ellie stood backstage with Shadow, smoothing down the oversized collar they'd given him for the ceremony. The gold medal hung from a dark blue ribbon, heavier than she expected. She kept touching it, not to fix it, but because she couldn't believe it was real. Shadow sat quietly beside her, calm, steady like he understood, but didn't need the attention. He was older now, a little slower, his muzzle streaked with soft silver that hadn't been there the year before, but his eyes, still sharp, still reading every heartbeat in the room. Ellie knelt down, fixing the clasp one more time even though it was already perfect. "You look, really handsome," she whispered, cheeks warming. Shadow blinked slowly, nudging her shoulder with his nose like, "I'm not the one who needs courage right now. You are." When Officer Grant called their names over the mic, the whole auditorium rose to their feet. The applause started slow, just a few claps here and there, and then it grew, rolling forward like a wave crashing onto shore. People cheered, whistled. Some stood on benches to see better. Ellie held Shadow's leash and walked beside him down the aisle. Her steps were careful at first, but the cheers wrapped around her like a warm blanket, and the fear she used to carry didn't feel so heavy anymore. Grant stood center stage, smiling the proudest smile Ellie had ever seen. He cleared his throat, holding the small velvet box with the medal inside. "Shadow," he said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "This town owes you more than we could ever say. You protected someone who couldn't protect herself. You exposed the truth when grown men tried to bury it. You reminded us what loyalty really looks like." He paused, blinking a little too fast. "And today, Riverton honors you." He knelt, this big, tough officer kneeling like a kid, and gently placed the medal around Shadow's neck. The crowd erupted. Shadow didn't flinch, didn't get excited, didn't wag like a goofy puppy. He just stood still, tall, proud, a soldier receiving his final salute. Ellie reached forward, wrapping her hand around the medal, feeling the cold metal warm beneath her fingers. Her throat tightened, not from fear, but from something bright and full and right. She looked at Shadow, eyes shimmering. "This is ours," she whispered. "Okay? Not just yours, ours." And Shadow, in that quiet way of his, leaned against her leg until she steadied. People took photos, wiped tears, clapped until their hands hurt. But Ellie barely heard any of it. All she could focus on was that medal glinting under the lights, and the dog wearing it. The dog who saved her life long before he saved her father's case. Standing on that stage with applause rolling through, the room like thunder, Ellie realized something. Shadow wasn't just her hero. He was Riverton's. And you know, after that big ceremony in Part 9, the cheering, the medals, the cameras, people kind of assumed Shadow would just keep going forever. Like heroes don't age. Like loyalty protects you from time. But time, yeah, time catches everyone, even the best of us. By 2031, everything around Riverton felt different. New buildings, new roads, new faces. But out behind Foster Ranch, nothing had changed. That old oak tree, the one with the crooked trunk and the swing someone built 20 years earlier, still stood tall, watching over the land like its own quiet guardian. And that's where Ellie went the moment Shadow started slowing down. She was 18 now, taller, stronger, carrying the kind of quiet confidence people gain when they've already survived more than most adults ever will. But her eyes, still soft, still the eyes Shadow had protected all those years. Shadow lay beneath the oak's shade, his body stretched across warm grass, his muzzle almost fully gray now, his breathing slower, softer, like every inhale was a small negotiation. Ellie dropped to her knees beside him. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, brushing her fingers through his fur. "I'm here. I'm right here." Shadow looked up, tired but aware. Those amber eyes still so full, still carrying all the years he'd walked beside her. In courtrooms, in therapy rooms, through nights she never wanted to remember. Ellie swallowed hard, her throat tightening like someone had tied a knot inside it. You don't have to hold on for me anymore," she murmured, voice cracking. "It's okay. You did enough. You did more than enough." Shadow exhaled, a soft, quiet huff, as if he disagreed, as if he'd stay forever if the world would let him. A breeze rustled the branches above them, scattering sunlight across his fur. Ellie wiped her face, but the tears kept coming. The ugly kind. The honest kind. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently to his. "Do you remember?" she whispered, voice trembling on every word. "The first time you nudged my knee in that therapy room. I think that's when you gave me my life back. And now I don't—" Her breath hitched. "I don't know how to do this part without you." Shadow blinked slowly, long, deliberate, reassuring her the only way he knew how. And then it happened. That moment every dog owner fears and understands. Shadow lifted one paw with effort, slow as sunrise, and placed it gently, so gently, onto her hand. Just a press, a touch, a message. His final signal. Ellie shattered. She curled over him, sobs shaking through her like something breaking loose deep inside her chest. "I love you," she cried. "Shadow, I love you so much. Please, please know that." His breathing slowed again. One rise, one fall, a pause, another rise, weaker. Ellie's tears fell into his fur, just like the very first day she ever held him. Full circle, beginning to end. The wind settled. Even the birds quieted, like the whole world was holding its breath with her. Shadow looked at her one last time, not scared, not confused, just present, loyal hers. And with Ellie's hand wrapped around his paw, he let out one last, soft exhale, the gentlest goodbye the world had ever heard. The oak tree swayed, the afternoon sun dimmed, and Ellie held him, whispering his name until her voice broke, and all she could do was breathe through the ache. But even through the heartbreak, even through the loss, there was something beautiful in the quiet. Because Shadow didn't leave her in fear. He left her in love. And after that day under the oak tree in part 10, The day Ellie held Shadow for the last time, life didn't snap back to normal. How could it? Losing a piece of your soul doesn't just fade. But time moved anyway, quietly, stubbornly, whether she was ready or not. By 1939, Ellie Turner was 26 years old, not the trembling little girl the world once saw, not even the guarded teenager who whispered goodbye beneath a dying tree. She was different now, steady, sure. The kind of woman who carried softness like a strength, not a weakness. And on a warm fall morning, she returned to Riverton. The Riverton Memorial Wall sat behind the police training grounds, framed by tall oaks and long rows of engraved stone. It was quiet there, not the sad kind of quiet, just peaceful. Like the whole place breathed with the memories carved into its walls. Ellie held a small velvet pouch in her hand, the entire walk up the path. Inside it was the one thing that mattered more than any award, any plaque, any headline ever written about Shadow. The tag home. The one she clipped to his collar the night he retired. The one that stayed there until the very end. She reached Shadow's panel on the wall, a polished metal plate with his name etched in clean block letters. Shadow K9 1.65 Quiet Valor Award recipient 2023. Her breath caught. Even after all these years, his name still hit her square in the chest. She touched the engraving, tracing each letter slowly, like she was reconnecting with an old map she used to know by heart. A breeze drifted through the garden, warm for late autumn, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant pine. Ellie blinked through the sting behind her eyes. "Hey, boy," she whispered. "I made it back." She knelt and opened the pouch. The home tag rested in her palm, scratched, worn, like it had lived a full life of its own. She held it to her chest. "You earned this," she murmured. "More than anyone." Then she placed it gently beneath his name. And in that moment, the world paused. Not with drama, not with music swelling, but with something softer, deeper. The kind of stillness that feels sacred. A few officers nearby noticed her. Some nodded. Others stepped back to give her space. Chief Daniels, an old friend of Grant Morgan, approached slowly. "You doing okay, Ellie?" he asked, voice low and respectful. She nodded, eyes never leaving the tag. "Yeah, I just needed to come back." He stood beside her, hands folded gently. "We still talk about him at the station. New recruits watch the case file during training. They learn a lot from him." Ellie smiled, small, soft. "That sounds like him, teaching people without saying a word." "He saved you," the chief said quietly. "He saved this whole damn town." Ellie wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "No," she whispered. "He didn't just save me that night." She breathed in, slow and steady, letting the truth settle. "Shadow didn't save me for a day. Shadow saved my whole life." It was quiet afterward, not empty, just full. Ellie stood there, letting the wind brush her hair, letting the sunlight warm her skin like an old memory. She placed her hand flat on the memorial plate. "I hope you know that," she whispered. "I hope you really knew." The leaves rustled above her. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, sharp, playful, alive. Ellie smiled. "You were home," she whispered. "You always were." And with that, she turned down the path, stronger, steadier, carrying not grief, but gratitude, and walking away from the memorial wall in part 11. Yeah, that should have been the end of it. But love, the real kind, the quiet kind, it doesn't end just because a story reaches its last page. Sometimes it hangs around, drifting in the air long after the moment's over. That's exactly how it felt for Ellie. The breeze rolled through Riverton the way it always did in late autumn, soft, cool, carrying that faint pine scent from the mountains. She stepped further down the path, but something tugged at her. Not painful, not physical, just a pull, gentle, familiar. She turned back. The Colorado wind moved through the memorial garden, lifting fallen leaves and spinning them around the base of the wall. For a second, just one, the entire row of metal plates shimmered under the sun, like tiny stars caught in daylight, including his. Shadow's name. The home tag she'd placed there caught the sunlight just right, throwing a small glint of gold across the stone, softer than a spark, warmer, like a heartbeat, like a reminder. Ellie walked back toward it slowly, each step quieter than the one before. She stopped at his plaque, letting her fingers brush the cool engraving again. Then she closed her eyes, and the strangest thing happened. She felt him, not magically, not like a ghost whispering from the other side, just in the way the air shifted, in the warmth on her shoulder, in the rhythm of her breathing syncing with something that wasn't really there, but also was. It felt exactly like those nights he slept beside her bed. That steady presence, that grounding, that quiet, unquestioning, "You're safe." She stayed like that, eyes closed, letting the breeze move around her, over her, through her hair, wrapping around the ache in her chest instead of fighting it. "Shadow," she whispered, letting the name drift into the air. As if on cue, a gentle gust swept through the memorial grounds. Not cold, not harsh, just enough to lift a few strands of her hair and brush them against her cheek, soft as a breath. She smiled, not because she imagined magic, but because it felt right. When she opened her eyes, the sunlight glowed off the tag, a tiny flame refusing to go out. She didn't touch it this time. She just watched. Memories rose up. Not the courtroom, not the fear, not the screaming. The quiet ones. Shadow lying beside her in the therapy room. Shadow nudging her knee at exactly the right moment. Shadow sitting next to her through every nightmare. Shadow watching over her without needing a single word. That's the thing about dogs like him, about love like his. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It doesn't try to be heroic. It just stays. Silently. Steadily. Like a pulse under the skin of your life. Ellie stepped back from the wall, drawing one deep breath, and then another. A group of officers passed behind her, talking softly. One paused, nodded her way, then moved on. The world felt big again, wide, open, but not empty. She whispered one last thing, her voice warm and sure. Some heroes don't need to speak. They just love. The wind picked up one more time, circling the memorial wall before sweeping across the training grounds, carrying her words with it. Ellie turned and walked toward the sunlight, stronger, steadier, carrying not grief, but gratitude. Not because she'd left Shadow behind, but because she finally understood she didn't need to hold him tight for him to stay. Some love never leaves, and before we wrap this whole story, let me ask you something real. If you've ever had an animal who stayed in your heart long after they were gone, would you say, A, it changed you, B, it saved you, or 6, it still walks beside you even now?